What have we learned from Pascal Siakam's first 2 games as a Pacer, and where does this trade rank among franchise history? Who else on the roster is a winner and loser from the trade? We'll talk about all that in the crossover of the century with the Miller Time podcast on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we have a lot to talk about. The Pascal Siakam trade through 2 games, its place in Pacers history as one of the bigger trades in franchise history, the winners and losers on the Pacers roster from the deal. There's a lot to dissect still through 2 games about this trade, and it's time to do something that I've wanted to do for a while, but I've never done, a crossover with both Miller Time podcast guys. Dave and John are here for a lengthy discussion about all of that, the Pacers' path forward, what comes next for this team. Man, do we get in depth. It's a fun one. Stick with us. Let's get right to it. The least ambitious crossover since Infinity Ward, as they say. The Miller Time podcast is back. Do I have to do introductions? How does this work? I think everybody knows the podfathers of the Pacer space. John and Dave are here, as they used to be called, Flava Dave. John, I can't remember your nickname. I'm sorry. You have to say
John
it.
Fillet.
Yeah, but it's like your name. It's not a nickname.
How dare
We're
you?
off to the races.
That's not a nickname. I was seeing it in my head, but I was having trouble because you have the law as your like fake middle name on Twitter.
I do.
You're too professional now, John.
Yeah, I know.
We take you too seriously to call you a fish.
It's John Fillet Esquire now, sir.
I'm never calling you that. We had to get the gang together. The Pacers made probably their biggest trade in franchise history. I'll ask that in just a second. Pascal Siakam's on the team, 2 games in. Start with you, John. Would you, 1, say that it is potentially the biggest trade in franchise history? 2, now that you've seen him play twice, what are your thoughts on the trade? Are they still the same? How are you feeling about the Pacers right this second?
To answer the first question, I don't think it's the biggest trade in franchise history. I think, at least in my lifetime, I think the easy candidate right now is the Haliburton trade.
Oh, fair, yeah.
You could also go back before that one and say the Paul George trade because
late 90s Davis trade.
It got Sabonis to, or if you even want to be like, if you want to go completely negative, you could go the trade that cost the Pacers a shot at drafting Michael Jordan.
That's true.
If you want to go way back, but no, I mean,
J.O. They traded for J.O., I guess.
Yeah, you gotta get the hindsight thing in there, which is fine.
I know. I'm talking about at the time of acquisition.
At the time of acquisition,
right?
Man, I don't know.
And you're saying Pacers history, so I feel like it's fair to say like the return, right? Not necessarily what's the sum total of all the people involved. And you say, well, you sent out Domas Sabonis, so obviously that makes it bigger. And now, Haliburton's been better, I think, than even the most optimistic person. But he was still a very highly regarded player.
That's true.
But when it comes to what is coming into the Pacers and what was known at the time of how good that person was, I think that's a real hard argument to say that this wasn't. This is the most valuable player that the Pacers have ever gotten via trade, ignoring what went out.
Right. And also, even if you consider what went out, the Pacers, I mean, I know they gave up 3 first-round draft picks, but 2 of those convey this year, and it looks like they're not going to be very good. And I know that you can point to where Siakam was drafted. He was drafted in the 20s. OG Anunoby was drafted in the 20s. You know, the Raptors and Usai Ujiri have been really good about finding talent late in the draft. But, you know, if you're the Pacers and you have Tyrese Haliburton, the Pacers now are in the same position they were when they signed Paul George to that extension. And the minute that the ink was dried on that contract, they were on the clock. They're on the clock now. And at some point, you've got to start winning games. You've got to catch up with your timeline. I don't think anyone in the Pacers organization expected the Pacers to be this good this year. I think they expected Tyrese Haliburton to continue growing. I don't think they expected him to be one of the 10 best players in the league this year as he's been when he's been healthy. So, given that they gave up a guy in Bruce Brown who likely wasn't going to be here long term anyways, Jordan Nwora, who was an end of rotation bench player, and then 2 first round draft picks, which are going to be in the 20s most likely, to get a guy who is an incredible upgrade at a position of need. Yeah, I think you do that 10 times out of 10.
Dave, continue if you have any other thoughts. Otherwise, we're going to read you a list of potential answers. Does the Chris Mullin trade count? Does that get close to this?
That was fun. And that was like, whoa, that's cool. But at the time, it was later in his career, and I think people had pretty muted expectations for what he would bring. The pedigree was cool. It was amazing to be like,
he was good.
Somebody that kind of famous was coming to the Pacers was a big deal. But I think everybody had a realistic expectation of what he would actually contribute.
Oh, guys, I found it. I found the answer. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I forgot about this. November 24th, 2020, the Pacers traded TJ Leaf to OKC for Jalen LeCue. I totally forgot. That
is a big one. You got to duck the tax when you got to duck the tax, man. You know,
yeah, anytime you can,
when the bills come, the bills come.
We hadn't made the point yet that the Pacers have so many young players. They're struggling to find minutes for their 2 first rounders from last year. So adding 2 first rounders this year, I think that they had to trade them anyway. Like, it would have been just smart to find some way to get value out of that. That wasn't just adding young players to the bench that couldn't get any minutes. And so that made it a very easy thing for them to sacrifice. I heard a little bit of hand wringing about the Pacers maybe knowing that they were on the clock and they needed to make a move, but I feel like they had giant red neon flashing signs that they were going to make a trade this year when they signed Bruce Brown to that contract. I mean, that was designed to be traded, and it seems like everybody was on the same page. That's what would happen onto this eventually. So having that be the centerpiece money-wise was just something that they went into the season. It's almost like they signed Siakam halfway last year in the offseason because of how they use that cap space, which is pretty smart. Now you've got the future pick in there, and you never know what's going to happen with that. That seems like the one real asset that the Pacers could use in some way, but man, that's a pretty small price to pay. And I think a lot of the reaction to the trade initially was a little bit muted because nobody knew what was going to happen in the offseason. If this was a rental, it would be disaster, be a big word, but it would suck. I mean, like, to throw all of that.
I will use the D word. It would be a disaster.
Well, I would say the only reason I would say that it's a disaster is they still have Haliburton. They still have everybody else. They had some picks and they have space. So, I mean, overall, it just in the big picture is, but obviously they would definitely end up losing that trade. But because they haven't announced what the next contract is going to be, it's still a little bit light, but it seems like they're telegraphing pretty clearly, like, we at least have some understanding that he's coming back from all parties. Yeah. And I'm pretty shocked to hear. I mean, I know Toronto worked so hard to try to obtain Myles Turner for so long. The fact that it seems like Siakam was the one driving that. He was the one saying, Myles Turner is like the perfect fit next to me. I'd really like to play with him. Having that come out, the fact that he was talking to Haliburton, the fact that he really wants to play with Indiana, that seems like they have some kind of, if not a handshake deal, at least like a broad understanding of, yeah, that sounds about right. I think that that's what we're going to head towards. That completely swings this trade from being like something that seemed like a good risk to something that is now an unbelievable kind of upside based off of the assets that they put out. I can't believe that the Pacers are the beneficiary of like a BS trade because a player forced his way to the Pacers. It's insane. Can you believe we're sitting here saying that? It's crazy. A two-time All-NBA guy forced his way to the Indiana Pacers as well.
And just to add on to that, the Pacers, in spite of what they gave up, they haven't painted themselves into a corner here. They still have flexibility. They still have young guys on rookie deals. They kept Bennedict Mathurin. They kept Jarris Walker, who both of those guys were rumored to have to be included in the trade to get Siakam away. And, Usai Ujiri, at least in his history, he has a tendency of hanging on until he gets what he wants before he pulls a trigger on a trade. So the fact that they kept those guys was huge. It was huge. And also, it also indicates that, they've got more tools in the war chest if they want to make another big swing in a trade. We look at someone like Bruce Brown, who you mentioned, whose contract was just built to be traded. Dave said there was flashing red lights. I mean, I feel the same way about Buddy Hield. I don't know what his
value.
We will
talk about Buddy Hield, John. Don't you worry.
Oh, for sure. I figure we'll get there, but I just don't know. I don't know what his value is right now, but yeah, he's a flawed player, but that seems unfair because there's no such thing as a perfect basketball player. He has good attributes that winning teams would want, especially, teams that, are contending this year. The point is, all that's just to say, they got a great player at a position of need that they desperately needed. and they still kept a lot of ammunition to make potential moves. And if this Siakam trade backfires, they still have ways of moving forward without this, which is why if it would be a disaster, I guess it'd be a lowercase d is where I'm at right now. And really, like Dave said, it really depends on what the terms of that contract are. I know that it was reported that Siakam wants a max extension. I would really hope that he doesn't get a max extension. But if you're the Pacers, what are you going to do? I mean, guys like this don't often, how often do guys want to come to and actually play for the Pacers? Dave just mentioned it. So Siakam's got all the leverage in his corner in that regard.
Okay, 3 thoughts. 1, Mark Jackson trade. We missed that one. That's probably a good contender.
I was going to mention that because you got Rookie of the Year. Being able to acquire him, that was a fairly big deal. It's in there, but Rookie of the Year is a lot short of being a 2-time All NBA player and a former champion, I would say.
Okay. 2. I think even if it was just Siakam or his camp or whatever being like, if you pay me the most money, I will stay. Like, even that is a good enough assurance, regardless of like specific terms. Because they can do that. They are the only team that can beat everybody else for sure. 5th year, more raises, whatever that happens to be. 3, I will propose this question now, and I will continue to beat this drum come free agency time. It is better to have Pascal Siakam on a 5-year max contract than to lose him in free agency, is the stance that I think is key. So if that's what it takes, I think they have to do it. Hey guys, short little break here to talk to you about the lovely folks over at FanDuel. NFL playoffs rolling. The championship games are going to be sweet, and there is still time to get in on all that action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. How about that? When you place a $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get that offer of $150 in bonus bets, win or lose on that $5 bet. They have an app. It's super easy to use. There's a ton of different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays. And you can even find whatever other bets you want to do in their new Explore tab and plenty more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup on FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL.
I agree. And, I think that you got to remember that the cap's going to keep going up. That obviously, that's a percentage of the cap, and that mitigates it a little bit. But, he has the kind of talent, I think, that combined with what Haliburton's making and what they might be able to backfill with kind of younger players that will eventually need to get paid. I guess the bottom line is, with a player of his impact, so many teams have been able to make it work. And I am unaware of a team that's been able to get to a championship level without paying like 2 guys that amount of money. What other path would there be? I would say. And they also have the picks and the young players that if they had to get off that money for some crazy reason, I feel like they would be able to do it. I don't think that you would necessarily need to. But if you were thinking, well, he might not be totally worth a complete max contract, he might be worth a little bit short of that. But how else are you going to get that player that is that short of that? And timing becomes a really big issue. It's easy to say now, oh, you got max space in the offseason. Like, what are you going to do? Max out Tobias Harris? And then, you've got Bruce Brown and you've got Buddy Hield's contract set up to be able to make a move like that. Well, that's a moment in time that's going to be gone pretty quickly. So once that's done and those young contracts start expanding, when else are you going to have the opportunity to really put together this amount of talent? So, Tony, what was the amount of Siakam's first year max if he was to sign that?
It's 30% of the cap. It depends where it comes in. If the cap goes up 10%, his 30% max would be the same as Haliburton's, 5 for $260.
Getting a premium talent is hard. If Siakam is really worth, quote unquote, like 25% of the cap, okay, you're overpaying him a little bit, but getting that kind of impact player is so hard. You have to say, if you're not going to pay that, then how else are you going to get a player with that level of impact over a replacement player or a very good starter? That's where it gets really tough to get. And that's where the only reason anybody would care about how much Siakam makes is opportunity cost. And I think that the opportunity cost of letting go of him and then trying to reacquire a player that can make that kind of plus impact, is offset in a way of how else would you make up that amount? What other options would you have to get that done? I think that Siakam is definitely the best path to that, and I think that impact could be a little bit overrated. If the Pacers could sustain Matt cap space for 5 years, okay, now you can rethink. Oh, okay, maybe you don't pay that contract. Maybe you wait one more year, but you're not going to be able to do that. That moment in time is going to evaporate, and so timing has to do with that too.
I agree. I got nothing to add. I think that the opportunity cost part of acquiring a star in trade is like, who the heck is mystery player X that will be available? You just don't know. You don't know.
Right. It's like, it's funny because it's like you have all these young players, you have all these picks, you have an awesome superstar in Tyrese Haliburton. You're looking around at what could be acquired. Siakam's the best option, and then you acquire him, and you're like, well, maybe you don't give him a max contract because you can get somebody else. Well, you just went through a cycle where you tried to get the best available talent. He was. So, you just proved to yourself that it's not that easy to get a guy that good.
Exactly. And, and another point, and Zach Lowe brought this up on his podcast that I think was really spot on, just to kind of piggyback off what Dave said, and even what Tony just said. You never know when the next big guy is going to become available. I think it was Woj that said the NBA now is pretty much just like the college transfer portal, where guys are just taking the contract now, forcing their way to a team later. But so you never know when someone's going to become available. But then you've got these teams like Utah and Oklahoma City who just are loaded with picks. So many of them aren't even their own. So they just, when it comes to who's to say if somebody else becomes available, the Pacers will likely get outbid there. And that's something that was a point I didn't even think about until Zach Lowe mentioned. Is like, oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, if you've got a guy of Siakam's caliber and all it takes is, Bruce Brown, who, like you said, wasn't part of the long-term plan, plus 2 picks are going to wind up in the 20s, you do it. And like Dave said, if you got to overpay a little bit, it's so hard to get a guy like this on your team, even especially when you're a small market team. That's just the premium you got to pay. That's the cost of doing business.
If you think, we could pass on Siakam and then get, I don't freaking know, name
Paul
a great, sure, in the future, and then he becomes available, and then it's like, just kidding, the Pelicans traded 7 firsts and Trey Murphy. It's like, okay, well, you lose, you just don't get him, and then you have nothing. You have neither player. So exactly. I agree with that line of thinking. I thought it made a lot of sense at the value they did it at. None of those picks, maybe assuming Tyrese Haliburton stays this good, at least will be any good anyways. The Pacers, this stat sucks now because of what you just said, where it's like the transfer portal, but they haven't had a second contract guy they drafted since Turner. But some of that's because they traded Aaron Holiday. They traded Goga. It's not like they were totally inadequate players. Either way, Siakam has played 2 games. In one of them, he was pretty dang good. 100 minutes by 25 points. In Portland, he looked great with Haliburton. And the other one, he played some center. Wasn't as effective. What have your guys' early impressions of him been? I like the way he's fitted with their style. Clearly going to take some work to integrate someone like that into their, as they call it, random action style. I don't want to just totally excuse stuff by just saying, it'll take some time. That's dumb. He's a talented player. I think he's been pretty good, though. What do you think? John, I'll start with you.
So in the first game, that Portland game, when Haliburton's back, the starting 5 was, I know it's against Portland. They've only won 10 games this year or whatever, but that starting 5, it just looked like they were just on gliders, man. The ball was whipping around. It seemed like there were some hiccups, but it seemed like with Haliburton out there, he knew who, especially when it came to Siakam, he knew where to get the ball to him, and it just, you could see that this is going to work. And my biggest fear when they got Siakam is this going to be Sabonis and Turner all over again. Is this going to diminish? Because Myles Turner's had an excellent season this year, arguably his career best. I was so hesitant. I was like, is this just going to be a repeat of what they did with Sabonis and Turner, where Turner's just basically shooting threes and getting blocks where he can? And that didn't happen. Both of them, Siakam and Turner, were over 20 points in that game.
He had 50 something combined, right?
Yeah, and I think you said on the podcast that you did a couple days ago, if the bench just shows up at all, they win that game by 20 points because the starters were so incredible. And then the Phoenix game happens and Haliburton doesn't play. And then, obviously the offense is going to fall off. But you see some hiccups there. And again, it's the second game. I'm not worried or concerned about anything yet. I'm just watching this evolve, like even the coaching staff and the players are. But I'm already anytime that Pascal Siakam takes the ball up court, I'm already making the yikes emoji face because his arms are so long and lanky, and he seems so uncoordinated, which is weird because like already on social media they're showing he's like a big soccer fan. They're already showing him doing like Pele moves with the basketball at half court. So he's got some finesse to his game, but there's just been portions where like even at the end of that Suns game, like he dribbles the ball and once he gets past half court, they just like they take his cookies and that's the end of it. So go Jake.
One more break here, guys. We can talk about the awesome folks over at PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. It's really simple what you do on PrizePicks. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch your winnings roll in. With basketball season rocking, you can do combo projections with football and basketball. For example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce still alive with the Chiefs. A combo of 10.5 3-pointers made plus receptions, or just do standard basketball ones. Anthony Davis for more or less than 2 blocks. Damian Lillard for more or less than 4 3-pointers made. Maybe not those exact lines, but something similar to that. 2 to 6 players, more than or less than. The more you get right, the more you can win. They even have a reboot policy. So if one of your entries gets hurt, your entry stays in play. How about that? One of the only daily fantasy sports platforms with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA to get started with a first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
Well, I would defend that because he played on Toronto for so long, and they had such a hard time creating basketball stuff because it's just the buckets. Just had a hard time creating basketballs.
Right.
Anytime it just couldn't round. It was making something that's round is harder than it looks. You know, you got to get every single. They had a hard time.
Like just caveat. Obviously, anytime Haliburton doesn't play, like there's going to be hiccups on this team.
Sure,
so that's not that's not me like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
But he had to do so much on-ball creation, and it's not – he wasn't amazing at it. You know, I think that he was good at it. Obviously, he was able to be an excellent player. I really don't want to take anything away from it, but you're trying to incorporate somebody into the best offense in the history of basketball, somewhat still improbably to me. It still feels weird saying it, but it still happens to be true. And, taking the ball and trying to create through a couple of different defenders is something that he's had to do so much in his career, and dribbling into traffic a little bit and getting a little bit caught. Hopefully the Pacers can get into a situation, especially with Haliburton in the game, where he's really not doing that very much. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think Siakam wanted to play here and why I thought that it would be such a good acquisition on offense, because you look at the offensive numbers and his ability to score and, the amount of buckets he can create for himself as well. You might scratch your head and say, well, it's the offense is so great anyway. What would be the point? But, when you look at the Lakers game, the championship game of the in-season tournament, I thought that really highlighted the importance of Bennedict Mathurin, because when the defense got really intense, it was hard to score buckets. Mathurin being a guy that could just bully through defenses and score against 2 or 3 guys became really important. His ability to get to the line became really important. You've added a second guy who can do that. And so Siakam's ability to get those tough buckets, you've got 2 options outside of, Haliburton to be able to get, baskets in tough situations on that. And when the defenses get really intense, you also have an outlet for Tyrese Haliburton when he gets trapped, like this sort of almost like a super Draymond Green situation where it's going to be really hard to double team Tyrese Haliburton when Siakam can get it in space. He is so good in scoring in space, and he's so good at finishing through contact and scoring that's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on opposing defenses, whereas something that Obi Toppin just can't do. I mean, like, if he's not going to be able to fight through a couple of different defenders and finish strong. It's just not what he does. He scores when he's open, So that we saw a little bit of that in these 2 games, in his ability to his famous spin move. If you're spinning into 3 defenders, that can get a little bit tough. But when you've spaced out the defense and they've trapped Tyrese Haliburton and you're spinning against one guy in the modern NBA, that's going to be really damn effective. And so I really love seeing that. Also having a guy of his size and length that can occasionally take on that impossible to guard guy. Siakam is not an amazing player in that regard. He's not like one of the 5 best on-ball defenders or anything like that, but he's very good, and you saw when he guarded, Kevin Durant at the end of the half, and he kind of shut that down. And you saw plays where he was, navigating switches very well and causing a lot of chaos and tipping passes. You're starting to see it bleed in a little bit of the kind of impact that he can make defensively. I don't think that he's going to be this Draymond Green-esque guy that is completely shutting down opposing offenses every single play. But I think that he can make plays like that. And that is the most exciting thing, is being able to make that offense work against the toughest defenses, and of course ramp up the defensive pressure a little bit. I'm hoping that being engaged on a team and having a much easier time on offense by having Tyrese Haliburton spoon feed him a lot of great opportunities is going to open up that kind of energy and passion to be able to make that kind of impact on the defensive end in a much more consistent way. And I thought we started to see that a little bit more in that Phoenix game. And hopefully they can figure out how to incorporate that in a more consistent way throughout the entire game.
I think it'll be a lot harder to hide guys for other teams defensively, right? They have to put a big 4 on Siakam instead of on Haliburton or Mathurin or whoever. And even the flip side of that, something that got noted right away by Myles Turner, is like, even if whether it was Obi or Jalen Smith, like opposing teams are putting their 4 on Myles Turner because he was involved in the screens all the time, and then their 5 on Jalen Smith. Can't do that anymore. Can't put a 5 on Siakam. He'll just drive right past him. So naturally, there will be more attackable matchups for the Pacers by default, just like lining up 5 guys on the floor. You don't have to do anything. And defensively, a core part of his size part of this, like that, we just saw it last Monday. People clowned them, and they should have a little bit. Like when Nembhard was guarding Lauri Markkanen last Monday, it was like, oh man, oh boy. But think about the starting 5 that game, because Nesmith didn't play either. Who's the best option? Like that, there wasn't really a good answer with him playing the 3. And I get that Nesmith did that too, but like in general, when they play these gargantuan Orlando, Utah, LA Laker teams, they always have had a matchup where they're outsized, even with their best defensive 5. Now everybody's kind of like naturally guarding their position, right? Turner's guarding a 5, Siakam's guarding a 4, Nesmith's guarding a 3, guards are guarding guards. Great. Like you can handle that a lot better. So even beyond anything he does, the fact that he's like a mobile 6'9" guy with fast arms is like that alone makes them better. Even beyond the fact that he's very good at a lot of things that help them. And then the offensive thing that I think will be perhaps paying the most dividends is when Haliburton's not in the game, actually, that they have someone else who can like score in the mid post, or like that you have to that draws attention. Like he's a pretty good passer. He averages 5 assists a game.
Right. Or some guard who doesn't just pull up for a floater, which like is good to have. But like it's like there's some games where like the best possession they can muster without Haliburton in is just TJ McConnell just driving under the basket a little bit, doing a little spin move to get like some space and getting a little floater up. But like, yes, it's nice to have more juice in the offense, more options, more creativity with your lineups that he brings to the table.
I agree. And so, yeah, there's gonna like the thing that I'll be the most curious about is the Pacers call. It's not actually random. Like they call their offense random action. That's not true. So it was random. Everybody be confused all the time. Like they know what they're doing. It
sounds like my love life in college. the random action.
Wow. Anyway,
anyways, bringing some good old Miller Time podcast bad jokes back. You thought I lost it. Surprise.
It will never go away. So no. I actually think it could take him a sec to like a lot of guys get traded and they go, oh, the terminology is different. I got to learn the terminology. I think that's true for everybody. But I think for him, it'll take a while to like read and react to what the heck they're doing because it's not so structured or like a word is said and then they run a certain play. But once he figures that out, that's when I think it will be past the point where you're saying like, oh, give him time. Like I kind of hate saying that with a player of his talent level. It's like, you should be finding ways to be impactful right away. But I do think in the context that they're calling it random action, I would like to give him like one practice of grace.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
no, continue, Dave. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, think of all
you
the
guys
time.
Are supposed to have synergy. What was that? Unbelievable.
All the times that Obi Toppin has just been open, essentially. He's made kind of an offensive living by we can kind of ignore him and live with maybe him hitting a few shots and maybe him doing a back cut and getting lobs and dunks and thinking of those opportunities that he's going to be able to like sneak in and wreak havoc is pretty enticing to be able to think about too.
Yeah.
And then what will defenses do to compensate for that when they have to actually guard that guy, not just a little bit, but a lot? Now what happens to the rest of the offense? You almost feel like a scientist saying, theoretically, a better offense could be possible, but is it really true? Something that we could do in reality? Like, couldn't they score more points than they're actually scoring? Would it be possible if this really truly clicks? If they have to have turn someone that could be somewhat ignored into one of the best offensive threats on the floor while keeping the rest of the lineup intact, what do they do then? What would defenses do in those situations? And I'm not real sure how defenses would be supposed to handle that when Haliburton and Siakam are on the floor with the rest of a good offensive lineup. It gets genuinely tricky to figure out what good solutions would be in those situations, which is pretty awesome to see and exciting to see if they can really get that clicking.
You mentioning, some sort of scientist scheming up an offense for the Pacers just made me imagine like Oppenheimer, like as the coach or something. I don't know, like that scene where he's like, some say you can't use a bottle of beer to make a bomb. In fact, you do. So he could be like doing some say you need a pick and roll to beat the Denver Nuggets. In fact, you do. I don't know. Anyways, more bad jokes from John. But anyways, back to actual.
That was definitely my favorite scene of that movie that I definitely
saw. You haven't seen Oppenheimer?
He doesn't watch movies.
No, it's pretty good.
You knew that, Dave. You knew that.
Did I?
He's too
like in your heart. You knew that. You didn't know that.
He's too busy having a life.
That is also false.
But you know what? I would buy you as like a Christopher Nolan guy, like the guy that only watches Christopher Nolan films. Like, I don't know. If that was you, I wouldn't be surprised.
If you had to say like Tony only watches X type of films, you can judge me for this. It'd be Jake Gyllenhaal films.
Were you X type of films or X rated?
Wait, what?
I know he's an actor. I know, not a director, but still, I like movies he's in. He's good.
Are you watching Prince of Persia every Friday?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, so Jake Gyllenhaal is a big star vehicle.
I can't say I like follow his career. I just like the things he's in.
What a poser! You don't even know Prince of Persia. Get the hell out of here.
I don't even know a box office bomb from 20 years ago.
And this is the last crossover you will ever hear as I get roasted by my friends on the internet.
I set myself back off. Tony earlier talked about there being a learning curve, and he's a professional basketball player. He should be able to come in and figure it out. But that's going to happen. It needs to happen soon because this month has just been murder for the Pacers as far as schedule goes. Like every night they're playing a playoff team, it seems like, and if they're the team they're not playing, who's the team they are playing who isn't a playoff team, it's on the second night of a back-to-back on the road. So, but this homestand. Yeah, you're back home, but at the same time, you're playing the Nuggets, Sixers, Suns, and Grizzlies. And I know the Grizzlies don't have John Morant, but still, this is the NBA. The Pacers have lost to the Washington Wizards twice. They can lose to anyone. They've lost to Portland Trailblazers twice. They can lose to anyone. So you can't take any of those things for granted. And then after that homestand, they're on the road to play the Celtics and the Knicks, and then they're back home to play the Kings. It's just the competition just does not stop in the short term for the schedule for this team. Especially with some of these Western Conference teams, they're going to need Pascal to catch up quick.
I agree. Does not ease up, and then the trade deadline's here, and stuff will happen. And look, they're firmly going to be top 8 in the East, just because if you look at the East standings, that's just how it's going to be.
I would hope so. Yeah,
getting top 6 should be easily their goal now after a trade like this. And
riddle me this, Tony.
Oh,
is Buddy Hield on the team after the trade deadline?
Well, you are the king of transitions, sir, because there's a lot of stuff. Okay, this is both a basketball question and a trade question. Winners and losers on the Pacers roster from this trade, not Pascal Siakam. And I'll say, we all know Tyrese Haliburton's a winner, not Tyrese Haliburton. The other players on the team, winners and losers. And I have a not basketball reason to start with 2 players. Can I do dorky trade stuff? Do you guys care if I do that?
It's your show, man.
Yeah, but it's boring for some people. Okay. Buddy Hield, expiring contract, right? No extension yet. Why are you laughing, Dave? I have just started.
He was. I don't know. I think John was so surprised that you kind of like negged yourself on your own show. I think is what that reaction was. He was
I will continue. Okay, Buddy Hield, expiring contract. Usually, the team has control till the trade deadline, then they don't, right? So that's a natural point of thinking about what to do with his future. Extension talks reportedly stalled in the offseason. Now they're here. I actually am going to put him in the winner category because the Pacers are now over the cap going forward, right? They're over the cap right now. They're going to be over the cap in the offseason. No, they will not have cap space again. And so they're now in the bird rights trap for every player they have bird rights for. If they lose Buddy Hield, they cannot get a different $20 million player on their team or whatever you think his value is as a free agent. He is the only way to keep that salary slot, whether it's re-signing him, extending him, or trading him for a player of similar contractual value. So yes, maybe they still consider trading him for a player with a longer deal at a similar price, but now they're more limited in that way, and they'd have to consider doing it that way instead of a different way. So because his salary slot is now more important to them as an over-the-cap team, they have more reason to try to keep him. And his value to their team as a team trying to win instead of play the long game is also now higher. So weirdly, even though he's on an expiring contract and may actually get fewer touches on the new look team, I think he might be a winner financially.
So what you're saying is that if Haliburton is LeBron, then Buddy Hield is Tristan Thompson in this scenario? Is that the answer?
Yeah, except he's.
I love this guy. Just resign him. It doesn't matter. Just whatever
Tristan Thompson
it
was
takes.
good, so I was gonna say no because Buddy Hield's good, but Tristan Thompson was good for those Cavs teams. So yeah, it's actually sort of apt. Yes.
Yeah.
Winner. Buddy Hield kind of wins.
Absolutely.
Please keep the Kardashians away from Buddy Hield in this team. Please.
What were you going to say about Buddy Hield, John? Was it something similar to that? Different than that?
Well, I mean, just in terms of, you could also make the point, just to kind of go along with your theme of winners and losers. I would also argue that he's a winner on the court for this.
Agreed.
Because Bruce Brown is now gone, and we saw it in that the Suns game. He was the only guard that night that brought his offensive game. I know that people on Pacers Twitter wanted to pick on him because of they're in crunch time. As soon as
the Suns wanted to pick on him,
they
exactly.
did. They did not want to. They did.
The Pacers go on this 11-0 run. They get a lead with like 3 or 4 minutes left in the game, and then there's every possession after that. It's just find Buddy Hield on defense, find Buddy Hield on defense, find Buddy Hield on defense, and Buddy Hield, he's one of those players where what he does is good, but the things he doesn't do so great are also just as bad as what the things he do is good or good. If that makes sense. Like he's one of the best, he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, but his defense is so subpar. It just brings everything down to this equilibrium. And he's sort of like an equilibrium player, which is part of the reason why I think he's never played a playoff game before, but also you give him the benefit of the doubt because the Kings have been a dumpster fire until very recently. So, but all that is to say is like, look, throw those critiques about his defense out of the way. He is still a 40% 3-point shooter in a league where 3-point shooting is very, very important. On a team where spacing the floor and allowing space for Tyrese Haliburton to drive and create and find guys is important. And with Bruce Brown gone, now it's Buddy Hield, Bennedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard, or Ben Shepherd. Like of those 4 guys right now, who's the guy that you can count on night to night? I would argue it's Buddy Hield. I know that Mathurin has higher ceilings, but look at the one night. My big gripe with Mathurin, and I'm a huge Mathurin fan, is the fact that he just doesn't have that consistency yet on either side of the ball. Like that Kings game, he's brilliant, 25 points. He's amazing. One of the big reasons. Yeah, amazing game. And then the next 2 games, he's just been flat on his ass, and he can't hit ocean in the water. It's just he's the most consistent guy offensively. And I think just from a playing time perspective, now that Bruce Brown is gone in that trade, I think he's a winner on the court as well.
I think Siakam's second assist, he drew 2 defenders and just pitched it to a wide open Buddy Hield for a 3. It's like, Buddy Hield will take that all day, right? Do you have any Buddy Hield thoughts, Dave, or do you have a different winner or loser?
Well, I think that it all depends on as far as keeping him at the deadline and extending him and all that. What role it's going to be and the amount of money it's going to be. There was, of course, the rumor before the season that he was going to get traded, and then a follow-up rumor that he was going to accept less money and maybe a little bit of a lower role. So it's, as a guy who is an excellent bench guard that can just bomb threes, that can make any bench unit score, and that can step up and start in a pinch, you can see that being, a good role for him. Yep. If they're going to he's almost in a way too good at that stuff because he kind of feels like, man, I should be starting. I could drop 30 any night, which is true. But I mean, it's possible to win a title with Buddy Hield as your starting guard, but I think you have to have a really good other four and have that be just a cheap other option as other teams have kind of replicated that success. I think it's just, there's just ceiling there. That's one of the biggest areas of improvement they can get is converting Buddy Hield into just an everyday solid starter, someone who is just either solid on both ends of the court or someone who is pretty good at 3-point shooting, but is at least an average defender. And upgrading that slot is the next on the list. 4 was the starting 4 was the number one priority. Next priority is that locked in starting 2 guard, and Buddy Hield's in the way of getting that done. So if there is a way of figuring out, assets that you can get from Buddy Hield, awesome to get a starting 2. If not, other things that you could do to plug and play and shuffle things around. That shuffle needs to happen. If he was going to come back and make like $8 million a year or something to come off the bench, it'd probably be more than that. But you know what I'm saying? It's another contract of $20 million a year is not going to happen. A contract where Buddy Hield should be. I mean,
that's a take.
Well, I mean, it might happen from their team. I'm just saying the Pacers can't do it. I mean, if they do that, I think
if they lose him for nothing, they are in a bind of team building.
What's that?
If they lose him for nothing, they're kind of in a bind for team building. They have 2 really expensive players, Myles Turner and a bunch of cheapo guys. It's hard to make trades.
That's where the trade deadline comes into play, my friend.
They got to figure it out.
Yeah, it's like so that's what I'm saying. If you're talking to him and he's saying like, okay, $12 million a year for 3 years, like, okay, fine. You're okay with coming off the bench, that amount of money, cool. If it's more than that, I think that they would have to very seriously consider breaking it off for whatever they can get. Even a possibility depending on the quality of the player. If it's a really good young player, pairing young assets or pairing something else with him could be a possibility, but a good name would have to materialize. I don't see anything like on the quote unquote board right now, as far as we are aware. But I mean, one way or another, he either needs to not be the starter or that position needs upgraded. I think their plan internally for a while has been Mathurin gets really good and they just swap spots. The question is that going to happen? Is Mathurin destined to be an incredible 6-man, so to speak? Can he come in and be the starter? A lot of questions there that probably the biggest swing for their future really is what they end up doing at the 2 guard going forward between Mathurin, Buddy Hield, and everything else that they could do. That's a very big position of volatility right now, and they got to figure it out.
Right, and
January. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, just to as a caveat to that, I was just going to echo the same thing Dave said about Mathurin. Like, I'm sure the Pacers internally were hoping that Mathurin would be farther along than what he's been this year. And if you look at his numbers, like, his scoring's down, but he's been more efficient by a tick. Mathurin's had a good year. It's just, I think what last year was so good, and Pacers fans are so starved of a first-round draft pick who actually comes in and contributes right away.
Yeah,
that they just maybe I think this year the expectations were a little bit too high as to where they should have realistically been. But yeah, like Dave said, that's the easiest fix. And if Mathurin is further ahead, maybe the Pacers can have their cake and eat it too, or maybe they do have a more incentive to get to deal Buddy. But it's just, I'm all on board with Dave with Dave's assessment here. It's that whatever happens at the 2 guard, whether it's Mathurin or Hield or whoever they decide to bring in, that's the next big question mark they've got to fill here.
I'm about to poo-poo both of you.
Another winner from this would. What's that?
I'm about to poo-poo both of you. I think they're starting 2. They have a starting 2 on their team right now who I would be starting at the 2, who is not either player you guys are talking about. Their roster right this second, before this trade deadline this year, I would be starting Andrew Nembhard at the 2 myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would make the starting 5 as defensively potent as possible. I think he'd be in a better spot without as many ball handling responsibilities. Dave, what was your next winner?
Yeah, I mean, I like Nembhard a lot as a player. I think that could happen. I think that that's a little bit more of he's sort of like when Neesmith was playing the 4. It's sort of like he's the closest to what we need. It isn't what we should have at this position, but he is the closest to the prototype of a player that should be in that spot, that he is the best option. I really
also compared to
I love him as a player as well. I mean, I think that having him as the third in a guard rotation is incredible. In another team that doesn't have freaking Tyrese Haliburton starting, I think that he'd be starting as a point guard.
Yes, true.
No, I am very high on him as well. And if that's just a way to get him minutes. But speaking of that, you see the vacating of that spot with Bruce Brown moving on. I mean, we're starting to see it a little bit. Maybe it's Jarris Walker's another one that's just a big beneficiary out of it. There's just a minute void, depending on who's available and who is healthy. I thought that maybe Nembhard would be getting more minutes in that circumstance. There's a lot of guys that end up kind of taking a little bit of a step back minute-wise just because they are deep and they have talent. But it seems like there has been some opportunity, and part of it's just the wake of the trade, and part of it is injuries. And the fact that Haliburton himself has, he's probably looked like he's going to come in and out for maybe a little bit here, but they're throwing the rookies into the mix a little bit. So, we saw, of course, some great stuff from Jarris, and he is having an immediate opportunity with just a power vacuum. They're going to set a new rotation. How is that going to work out? If he can time it right now to go out on the court and play awesome basketball and force his way into the rotation, I don't think that they're going to play any favorites. If he looks like he can play NBA minutes and impact both offense and defense, he's just going to get a role. So he just has the literal opportunity to get on the court and play well. And we've seen some good stuff, early stuff right away. And, he's not super far away from Siakam. He's not a clone of Siakam, but just the ability to be somebody that can defend multiple positions, that can pass the ball, that can create on offense. Not at all a clone of the same player, but a lot of the same ways that Siakam can impact the game, so can Jarris. So that's a good guy to learn from and just kind of learn the ropes, learn his experience, see how he operates in practice, and kind of learn some tricks off of him. Definitely, probably a little bit of a better mentor than Obi Toppin, I would say, to be able to model his game after. So, being able to see how he impacts the courts and learn a little bit from that could be helpful for him too. And it also creates that situation where, teams, when they have a certain player in the starting lineup and they're out for an injury, sometimes a less talented player comes into that spot because of the prototype of that position, and they work the same way, and the offense and defense can function in a similar way. Siakam does create, once they adjust the offense and defense to his style of play, I think creates maybe just a tiny bit more of an opportunity for Jarris to be able to plug into the same systems and operate in somewhat of the same ways.
Okay, I'm going to bounce off your Jarris stuff, and then I'm going to lob to John for a second to talk about the 4 position. First, I have to finish on Buddy Hield by saying he is no longer renegotiation eligible because I don't have cap space anymore. That kind of makes him a loser. He could still be extended until the day before free agency. And I wonder now if he'll get to free agency and go, maybe this is the most money I can get, and just sticks around because they have the full bird rights on him. And he's an expiring contract, so I will flip to another expiring contract, sort of, different way, to talk about Jarris in the 4 position. And that's Obi Toppin. He's a restricted free agent, right? So expiring contract, kind of not. His qualifying offer, if the Pacers send it out to him right now, assuming he stays out of starter criteria, would be just over $7 million. I think he is worth more than that, probably as a player, but there's not a non-zero chance he'd just sign that immediately, right? I don't know. He's like an 8th guy on a team. I think Obi Toppin's played well for the Pacers, but they just traded a guard who's in their rotation and a guy who's out of their rotation for a forward in their rotation. So there's going to be less front court minutes immediately. Jalen Smith's going to play. He was amazing at Phoenix. He hit a fadeaway 2-dribble jumper over Kevin frickin' Durant. It was sick. Jalen Smith's going to play. Myles Turner's going to play. Pascal Siakam's going to play a lot. So Obi Toppin, upcoming free agent Obi Toppin, who has played well for the Pacers at no fault of his own. Siakam's just better than him. He's a loser, right? His opportunity is smaller. And notably, to get Siakam, they did not trade the 8th overall pick at his position, who's coming up for those minutes at some point. If they had traded Jarris, maybe he could feel better. So I don't think it's like with Wara. Wara played well for the Pacers last year, but drafting Jarris and getting Obi Toppin for almost free, like you do that, right? You just do that if you're the Pacers. So he didn't play. It's not his fault. It's how it is. I think it's similar to Obi right now, where he's playing fine. He's doing what they're asking, but they had good opportunities to upgrade their roster and they did it. So I don't know what they would do with Toppin. They just got him for 2 seconds. What's his value now playing a little better? But he's an interesting one also as an expiring who might not have a solid long-term role, especially with Jarris coming up and his qualifying offer existing. So I think he could be a loser both financially and on the court because he's going to play less. And in the same vein, Isaiah Jackson's a loser. But in that Jarris Walker, Obi Toppin grouping, John, what do you feel like about their immediate futures from this?
Just to stick with Obi Toppin, you said the qualifying offer is $7 million.
If he does not meet starter criteria, which I will not get into that on the show because we would go for a long time, it would be $7.74 million 1-year deal.
Okay. Well, I mean,
that's
given
close.
how
That's close.
It is, but also just given how much the cap's going up. I mean, how much is $7 million? I guess it all just depends in the context of how much is he going to get
next year too. Like every dollar.
Yeah, we'll have to worry about the tax. I mean, you're right that he's a loser in a sense, but Obi Toppin has validated himself and sort of vindicated himself. I mean, he was traded to the Pacers for what, like future second round picks in like 2028, 2029.
Two second rounders that are worst of seconds. So like they're bad seconds. Yeah.
So they're bad seconds, and he's playing really well this year. I mean, 11 points per game, shooting 40% from three, almost 60% from the field. His effective field goal percentage is 67%. His athleticism, in terms of athleticism, he might be one of the most, if not the most athletic guy on the team. He definitely brings a skill set that is valuable, not just to the Pacers, but I think to teams in general. I think it really just depends on how the market plays out. If a team wants to come in and overpay him, then the Pacers would say, well, what did it was Jan Mahimi, Larry Bird. It was reported when Jan Mahimi got that big deal from the Wizards all those years ago. Larry Bird was like, "Congratulations, we're not going to match it though." Like that's I imagine like it just. I imagine it depends on how the market views Obi Toppin. I think he's valuable for sure. How what the market is going to say about what his value is, I don't know. I think, and again with the Siakam contract being brought on, the Pacers, like you said, aren't going to have cap space. This is a team that usually doesn't go over the tax, and I don't know if Obi Toppin's that guy that you're willing to go over the tax on. So I guess long-winded answer to that is it just depends on the contract. It really does for me.
It does.
Yeah, I think that Obi Toppin's an NBA player. That he
rotational player. I think.
Yeah, yes. For sure. Yeah.
Agreed.
He has the specific skill set that he's a finisher, and if you leave him open, he will burn you. You leave him open for three, he'll knock down the shot. If you don't guard him on the weak side, he will do a back cut and get an all-you. Just any weakness that the defense has, he'll try to probe it a little bit, and he can get the ball and he can finish it at the rim. When it starts to get in trouble where he has to create or he faces any sort of real friction, obviously he's not very good on defense, but that specialty is good. And, being a part of any team especially a team that needs a burst of offense, if the bench sucks or if the team just in general has trouble scoring, having him being able to come off the bench immediately up that bench's offensive production, and then also be one of those guys that can either be a pinch starter or someone that in a very specific matchup can kind of come in a playoff series and kind of bust it open a little bit. That basically kind of almost like an Austin Crozier sort of do that tool that you can kind of that you can put in a specific game to be able to break a defense that needs a little bit of breaking. I mean, he could play that role. And so I think that he will be in the NBA for a while. I just don't think that the Pacers are the team because of how many bigs that they have, because of Walker coming up, and the fact that Siakam's going to be a big minutes eater.
Yep.
So they got Bruce Brown, and so they took Duarte and swapped them for Toppin. Like we need to figure something out permanent at the 4. So we're going to take a dice roll on this position. So I kind of feel like they need to swap it back, where it's like
they need Chris Duarte back.
Yeah, I mean, literally Christian. Why not? I mean, I like Duarte. That's what we needed the most. So we took that one slot and took the dice roll there. if they have an opportunity at the deadline to dice roll back on a wing, something that's a little bit tilted more towards the three, maybe. So, someone that is a more defensive minded, if they can get that type of player and take a dice roll on that, and just either somebody in the same situation where it's like it's on that last year, they're not going to pick up the next contract, so maybe they have that 1 year left, or maybe someone that's just on a cheapo contract, someone of that kind of talent level, but is defensive oriented on the wing, I think would be a smart thing for them to be able to flip. And so if they do keep Toppin at like $7 million, I think it's really just about assets in a way. Like,
sure,
he could play in an emergency, but we're also going to sign him because this is a reasonable contract, and eventually we'll find a deal for this on December 16th of next year. But I just don't really see a path to Toppin being a regular player on the Pacers. And I think that he is a rotational player in the NBA. And so my prediction is that they'll move him at the deadline for something. I think that they will, actually.
Would you guys like to humor me on fake trades? Tony never does this. Fake trades. Please tell me if you
Dave used to always roast me.
Buddy
Dave used to,
that's what I'm excited about, by the way. I'm clapping because I get to roast somebody. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Okay, Buddy Hield plus Obi Toppin together to accomplish the goal of getting value at the position that Dave just described and a salary beyond this year to keep Buddy Hield's salary slot. All right. Those two in a trade package together. You'd have to add picks some way. I just found the salaries that work. Let me name 4 names for you. Keldon Johnson.
Okay.
Friend of the Pacers, Bojan Bogdanovic.
Okay.
Terry Rozier. Little bold because he's more of a 1, but he can play the 2. And perhaps my favorite of these answers, but definitely the riskiest, Andrew Wiggins. Does any of that interest you? Oh, no. John's Wiggins face was not good.
So someone was going to talk me into the Wiggins stuff, and then I looked at the contract. Isn't it like 4
it's bad.
more years?
It's scary.
4 more years. It's like that.
Gosh,
that plus a max extension for Siakam. I mean, no, it's not going to happen.
Best Andrew Wiggins is like the best 3 possible between Haliburton and Siakam. The problem is, of his 8 or 9 year career, we've seen best Andrew Wiggins for like 1.5 of those years. But still,
I'm looking at his contract now. Wiggins next year gets 26.7, 28.2, and then he's got a player option in 2026 for $30 million.
It's just you spent the luxury cash a little bit on Siakam here, and you just don't have it left over for Wiggins. It's just too much, I think.
I think of the best contractual ones, Bojan's the best of those. I don't know why the Pistons would do that, but unless there's more stuff added. But like that kind of idea makes sense to me to solve all of the problems of the winners and losers discussion we just had.
What's Bogey's contract? Hit me with the numbers.
To this year and next year at I forget exactly what, something like low to mid 20s. I'll look it up while I'm talking.
I think that's actually probably a pretty good idea, because I know that the Pistons want to get better because they're an embarrassment to.
Okay, Bogey is this year at 20 million and next year at 19.
Do it. I think that makes sense. I think that you extend it. It's not a long extension. You get a little bit of a homecoming. You
probably have to include more as the Pacers, I think.
What's that?
Just Hield Toppin. Actually, you're definitely going to have to include more as the Pacers. I don't know what, though.
Yeah, I guess it's just, I have no way to predict what Detroit will or will not do. Nothing they're doing is making any sense.
Neither does Detroit, so that's
so I mean, if they're willing, if they're in, I'm in. You can have a second if you want.
Anyway, those are ideas to solve all of the problems we have just described. But I don't know that they should do that. I'm just like, if they were being exceedingly proactive in a way that like might not actually make them a better team, but it's just like contractual proactiveness, those would be the 4 names.
I have a soft spot for Scary Terry because I dismissed him too much too early in his career.
Me too.
That's a cool. We all did. So we all owe Scary Terry an apology. But they've got kind of the on-ball offense thing pretty covered, I think. And they're already stretching guys that are probably a little bit better served the 1 into the 2, and that's kind of you're just sort of adding to the problem that you're supposed to be solving by doing that. You add a guy like that to the team, it seems cool, but that wouldn't be my pick, I don't think.
I actually have one more name.
Go for it.
Ironically, given that we just
think I
talked
know
about
who it is.
Bojan, the other Bogdan Bogdanovic,
Okay.
Okay.
same concept. Then the Hawks have tax
Sure.
concerns, so 2 expiring contracts could be appealing to them.
Sure.
So similar idea of
Yeah.
using the packages. What was the name you thought I was going to say, John?
I thought you were going to say Gordo.
Oh, not a bad. Well, you have to re-sign him, but he'd be cheaper than what he is now. So that's also not a terrible idea. But he's more 4 than 3
Yes.
to me.
That's yeah, definitely more 4 than 3. I haven't even looked at his stats. Charlotte is just not a team I've paid any attention to at all this year.
Except for
what's
me,
he
you and I
doing
watching
this
them
year?
together before we started.
You literally
Before we started
Yes,
recording
yes,
this episode.
yes. Well, that's because like Cat was going off and they still lost. I mean, what's Gordon doing this year? He's averaging 14.5. He's shooting. I mean, his percentages are fine. He's definitely not the player he used to be, but I mean, he's still definitely a valuable player. I mean, I think you're right, Tony. He's not going to get $30 million a year ever again. But
No.
I would be inclined, if I was the Pacers, I'd be inclined if I didn't have to re-sign him. But I think the fact that you've got Bojan for another year at a reasonable deal and he's still playing very well, I think that makes it a bit more.
Yep.
I think that's of all the names you've listed so far, I'd probably say that Bojan's probably. Also, I'm very biased, obviously, given his history with the Pacers. But
You and I sat next to each other during the Bojan game.
oh yeah,
the playoff game of all time. I think of those names, Bogdan Bogdanovic is my favorite, but he's also probably the least likely because the Hawks' incentive would just be saving money. Fellas, we've been going for a while. I don't have time for any other winners and losers. Unless you want to just blurt out a name as a winner and loser quickly.
Us.
Myles Turner winner. Myles Turner. Dave Searle, big winner.
David Harrison winner.
One of
Fred
Mathurin
Jones,
and
winner.
Gonna have way less shots coming their way. So one of them will be a loser because Bruce Brown's 9.5 shots a game is not enough for Pascal Siakam. Was it the crossover you guys hoped it would be? Did you have as much fun doing this as you thought you would?
Oh, this was a blast. I would do this again in a heartbeat if you asked me to do it. You call me.
We need to get this was just sort of the warm-up session for the threesome here, where we just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knew the rules and got acquainted with each other. But I think if we did it again, we would ramp up some of the bad impressions, some of the bad jokes, some of the movie quotes, a little bit more roasting. I think that we would probably want to crank up the heat next time. But this is good.
I'm still awesome at doing I'm still very good at doing my bad impressions. I've been saving them for 6 years.
I got to admit, it felt good. It felt good
hearing
John kind of just get going doing a Pacers spiel. It's been a long time since I heard you string 6 or 7 sentences together that were just bang on analysis. It just brought me right back. It was a good sense memory. That was good. That was where we are.
You started talking to John. It's at halftime of a game, and we're like, man, that one play and that one player. And it's just half-hearted baked thoughts about a game that's happening right now.
Yes, let's do this again. Give the people what they want.
We will survey the crowd. I'm sure everybody's gonna love this. So, if you didn't love this, please direct. If you did not love this, please direct your tweets to @MillerTimePod. He will be fielding the complaints file tomorrow. If you did love this, @TonyREast is the way to file your pleasure with this all returning. And if you were neutral on it, @John LaFollette is where you will send your neutral opinioned internet tweets too.
I don't tweet very much anymore, but man, when I gave up the Pacers writing beat, I had 2,300 followers on Twitter. I have 1,600 now. I'm surprised it's even that high. I'm surprised it's even that high.
I think it's worse that they followed you without you even tweeting. They're just you know what? We're gonna scroll through the list. Screw this guy.
Life advice. Sometimes it's better to just shut up, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's after a long day. It's nice to come home and just watch a Pacer game and not be on Twitter.
So remember, if you're out there and you want to express your pleasure, please tweet Tony East.
We're off the rails. It's time to go, everybody. I myself will be back tomorrow night after Pacers Nuggets, talking about whatever happens in that game. The home debut of one Pascal Siakam. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you then.